What happens when you take the concepts of a roguelite and mash it up with the ever-popular city-building genre? It's a question that didn't have an answer until today. Hey there friends, it's Kodiak here, checking out a brand new game, Against the Storm, to find out if it's worth your time. For the last few days, I have been immersed in Against the Storm, a game I really didn't anticipate myself playing, but boy am I glad I did. I've said it before, but if there's one thing I love about video games, it's when developers surprise you with new ideas or a unique approach to an old idea. That's exactly what Against the Storm does. It takes a whole bunch of great ideas from different games and genres and pieces them together in a way that's both infuriating and ridiculously addicting. This one has a lot of layers, guys, so I'm going to do my best to take you through the game piece by piece, reflect on each of those systems, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a greater understanding of what this game brings to the table. From a 30,000-foot perspective, your goal in Against the Storm is to appease the Scorched Queen and rebuild the smoldering city. You'll do this by setting out into the wilds and establishing settlements. It sounds easy enough, but don't be fooled. Not only is the game incredibly multi-layered, it's also challenging. As someone that's been playing games in both the roguelite and city building genre for about a decade, I was actually surprised at how much I was struggling to get my footing in Against the Storm. That's not a bad thing, and I want to be clear here. I was over the moon that a game was finally presenting me with an actual challenge. Not an artificial one, but a challenge based on the complexity of its systems. But to really understand where that challenge comes from, we need to take a step further. To get the resources you need to rebuild the smoldering city, we'll need to attempt, and I use that word intentionally, establish a settlement on the visible map. Each tile represents a map encounter, and each tile also represents a specific biome within the world. Each biome offers a unique set of challenges, available resources, and is the first layer to the overall complexity of the gameplay. The map also contains points of interest and chests, both of which add another dimension to the game. Points of interest can change up the passive buffs you take going into a map encounter, or provide you with an opportunity to pick up additional smoldering city resources. Now, if you're already exhausted, just hang in there because we're just scratching the surface. With a tile selected and a map encounter in sight, there are two final things you need to do. Choose your caravan and select an embark bonus. Depending on the map you choose, you'll want to be smart about the caravan you select. Think of these as your starting roster and resources. At the start, there are just 3 races available to you: humans, lizards, and beavers. Each thrive under certain conditions and perform tasks differently depending on where they're assigned. But again, we'll get there. Your embark bonuses are a bit more straightforward. You have a certain amount of points that you can spend to bring some additional resources along at the start of a round. Probably the most straightforward thing in the game, if I'm being honest. You do get more embark options and points the further you develop the smoldering city, which is just a little tease of how the roguelite elements come to life. Okay, take a breath and try and let all of that sink in, because that's just the setup for the gameplay itself. I think now is a good time to really set the stage here. A key aspect of roguelites is failure, and that's just not something the city building genre is accustomed to. If you play city builders to build the perfect, most pristine settlement, you are 100% playing the wrong game, because Against the Storm is so far removed from that idea that I don't want there to be any illusion to the contrary. Now from this point on, it's you against the world as you try and complete orders, keep your population happy, weather the storm, and above all else, impress the queen. The start of each round presents you with a small splash screen, and it's important you don't just blow through this, because these forest mysteries should dictate how you approach the round. These are completely random and present as a couple positive effects, as well as a slew of negative effects. The positive effects occur during drizzle, one of the 3 weather cycles within the game. You'll want to carefully study each positive effect to understand what forces are working with you during the round. Now on the flip side of things, you'll also want to check out the negative force mysteries. Outside of that first effect, looming darkness, these are random as well and can present you with a number of challenges, all of which you'll need to consider and adjust for as you tackle each map encounter. What's challenging about forest mysteries is the randomness. A good set of positive effects can completely transform your approach to a map, but in the same vein, you get dealt a bad hand with the negative force mysteries, and you might as well pack it in because nothing is working to your favor. To better understand these mysteries, we also need to understand how they happen. I mentioned those 3 weather cycles before. Clearance is the equivalent to a sunny day. Nothing bad happens, all is good. Drizzle is the mid-cycle and is the period when your positive buffs are active, meaning this is often the best cycle for progression and growth. Drizzle leads into the final cycle, Storm, and this is where things get intense and those negative mysteries have a chance to activate. Now I say have a chance because you do have some control over how quickly you're overwhelmed by the effects of the storm. Each map encounter is dictated by hostility, another system within the game. If you scroll over this spooky red eye icon, you'll see that a number of factors increase hostility, including how many years have passed in-game, how many regular glades you've explored, how many dangerous or forbidden glades you've explored, how many villagers you have, how many woodcutters you have, how many hearths you have, and the queen's impatience. These are all factors that increase or decrease hostility, and that's important because those negative forest mysteries only activate when hostility is at a certain level, so part of your goal is to keep hostility in check by managing your activities. The entire game, top to bottom, is a balancing act, and while you don't have the full scope of that just yet, I hope you're starting to see how the layering of different systems adds to the overall experience within the game. We haven't even placed our first building, and at this point you might be wondering, well, how the heck do I even win with so many things stacked against me? And that's the right question to ask. Remember, the Smoldering City and the Scorched Queen, those two things should always be in the back of your mind because they're the only things that really matter. To win a map encounter, you need to fill up the blue reputation bar on the bottom left of your screen. You do this by completing orders, which are essentially challenges you receive throughout the round. When selecting an order, you do have a few options, and here again, you'll need to study and think carefully about your selection because everything, and I do mean everything, is interconnected. A small example, certain resources are only available on certain maps, and if you choose an order that requires a resource that's not really on that map, well, fat chance of you actually completing said order. You can't always trade, for the most part, but then again, you're at the whim of fate. Reputation is your key to success, and it's the only thing that really matters if you hope to progress within the game. There are other factors at play here as well, such as resolve. Each of the 3 races in your game have different things that improve their resolve. A high enough resolve means an increase to your reputation gain, so it's worthwhile to invest in your people. The tricky thing here is each race has a different creature comfort. Some might like to eat meat skewers while others prefer biscuits. Unless you have a perfect run, the chance of you getting everything for everyone is pretty challenging. Not impossible, but challenging. You'll also be able to improve reputation by sending items back to the queen, something we'll touch on shortly. Now, on the flip side of things is the loss game factor, the queen's impatience. This bar, represented on the bottom right of your screen, fills up throughout the map encounter. If it fills up, the round is over and you lose. And believe me, you're gonna lose. The good news is this is where the roguelite elements come back into play. Depending on your reputation progress within the round, you'll receive some sort of Smoldering City resources. This will allow you to unlock a few passive upgrades, hopefully, which should, in theory, help you during your subsequent rounds. You can also complete achievements called deeds within the game throughout all of your games. These are overarching objectives like explore 50 glades or sell goods worth 200 amber and carry through from mission to mission. Achievements or deeds actually matter in Against the Storm because for every one you complete, you get some sort of reward, be it experience, a new building, an embark bonus, or even a new trader. All right, let's take another deep breath because again, it's a lot, and I get that. The systems all work together, and that's something I deeply appreciate about the developers' approach to this game. Think about some of the AAA games you've played and how the systems sometimes just feel like one-offs with no connection to the rest of the game. That's exactly the opposite of Against the Storm. Every single system the developers have put into place have an intimate connection to something else, and all of that together makes for the complete gameplay experience. If you consider we haven't even hit play on a game yet, it's pretty astonishing. I think we're there though, ready to dive into the action and talk about what happens once the world of Against the Storm comes to life. Everything we've talked about has led us to this point, the start of an actual map encounter. It's amazing how much there is to understand before actually hitting play, but it's essential understanding if you hope to survive the storm, pun intended. The first thing you'll realize when starting a round is the lack of space you have to build. That's because Against the Storm isn't about building that ornate settlement. It's about building reputation before it all comes crashing down. From this point on, it's about careful planning and expansion. You start the game with the basics, like you do with every city builder, throwing down a few woodcutter camps, and then taking a look around at the available resources and plopping down the corresponding buildings so you can start building up your storage. Once those starting buildings are built, you'll need to assign them workers. As I mentioned earlier in the video, each race is good at certain things, and assigning them a task that they excel at is important. For example, beavers are skilled woodworkers and enjoy engineering tasks. Assigning them to those tasks give them better efficiency, ultimately netting you more items in the process. What you'll notice almost immediately is that the playable area is tiny. Surrounding you are glades that you'll need to discover by chopping through the forest that connect your base with the unknown. Small glades feature some random resources. Dangerous glades include a glade event, usually some sort of point of interest, sometimes some abandoned goods and resources. Finally, forbidden glades contain a whole lot more, including glade events, resources, abandoned buildings, abandoned goods, you name it, it's probably in a forbidden glade. Glades are both a blessing and a curse. They contain valuable resources and interactables you need to progress, but discovering a glade immediately sets off a chain of events. For each glade, big or small, that you uncover, you now have to contend with additional hostility. Those glade events also trigger a timer as soon as they're discovered. Unless you can complete the glade event before the timer runs out, you'll have to deal with the specific and often severe consequence. The effects vary, but as a quick example, failing to complete these events often correspond with you losing a substantial chunk of your resources, killing off settlers, and even destroying entire buildings. They're no joke, which is why revealing them should be a strategic part of the game. Reveal too many too quickly and you'll end up spiking your hostility and starting timers I can almost guarantee you're just not ready to handle. If that doesn't sound intense enough, there's also prerequisites and working effects to nearly every glade event. Oftentimes you'll need a few key resources before you can start investigating a glade event, and while working on a glade, you'll also have a working effect which negatively impacts your entire settlement. That's why you need to think carefully about when you trigger the investigation. Tackling a glade event during drizzle is drastically different than attempting it during a storm. Just another thing you need to balance. Whatever you find out there in the world, you'll have two options with how you want to deal with it. You can choose to keep the resources or to send it back to the Citadel. This is your key to quick reputation, but you'll lose out on those valuable resources. Again, balance. Glades are the biggest X factor during a map encounter. They're your key to success, but also your key to defeat, which is why it's so important to think about how you approach each glade, big or small. If I'm being completely honest, glades are part of the reason Against the Storm won me over. The simple act of constantly exploring, moving buildings, and expanding your settlement's reach was something I had never really experienced to this depth in a game before. Even when compared to one of my all-time favorite survival city builders, Frostpunk, I found that Against the Storm presented ideas I had never even considered before, and that all made for a better gameplay experience. Now, we've covered a lot of ground already, but we still haven't touched on the core gameplay, and it's high time we do that. As you'd expect, you need to maintain your settlement through a variety of ways. At the center of your village is your ancient hearth, and this has to be maintained throughout the map encounter. This is where we get our first taste of the flexibility of the game itself. To maintain the hearth, you can use coals, sea marrow, oil, or good old-fashioned wood. This flexibility is a theme that you'll see from building to building as you attempt to build up your settlement and create different things. Remember, orders are essential to your success, so after a few minutes of getting your base established, you'll have to choose your first set of orders. Your decisions here will set you down a path of choices. Each order requires different deliverables, but also rewards you with different things. Some orders simply reward items, while others reward important buffs. All, however, reward reputation, and that's why they're so important to complete. If you're having a hard time connecting the dots, let me make it abundantly clear. To win, you need reputation. You get reputation by completing orders. To fulfill an order, you need to do certain things or obtain a set amount of items. To get those items, you need to build the right building so you can produce the items in demand. How you do that, you might be wondering, well, by increasing your reputation, of course. I told you, everything is connected. When you start around, you have a few core buildings, but the only way to obtain new buildings is by reaching certain reputation milestones. You get 3 right out of the gate, and these initial buildings should inform the first set of orders that you take, because again, they're all connected. After that, you'll receive 1 new building choice for every reputation milestone that you reach. Things start off with a new building every 1 reputation, but as you gain more reputation, those choices become a bit more sparse. Just like everything in the game, choosing what buildings to unlock has ripple effects, especially when you consider the production line it takes to create some of the more complex items. The game also presents you with more choices in the form of cornerstones and newcomers, 2 things you have to handle at the start of each round. Newcomers mean more settlers to assign and utilize, but it also means more strain on your infrastructure. You can't deny newcomers, which means the system almost acts as a sort of soft fail as it's constantly pushing the limits of your settlement. Cornerstones, on the other hand, are a bit more intricate. They're essentially buffs, but their impact ranges quite a bit. You can decline to take a cornerstone if you'd like, which I've done a few times, but here again, there is a deep connection between the buffs that you take and the objectives you're trying to accomplish. If you manage to survive a round of the storm, you're rewarded with a new set of newcomers and a new set of cornerstones. Now, what I absolutely love about Against the Storm is how many quality of life improvements they managed to shove into the game. For example, most production items have interchangeable reagents. Don't have a lot of one item, well, you can use another as a base, and you can do it all from the building's production menu. In the same vein, if you want a quick glance at what workers you have on what buildings, you can toggle a specific view of the world and quickly optimize your settlers without clicking through a million buildings. Finally, and I have to touch on this because it's often a huge issue in other games, let's talk about alerts. Not only are there visual alerts that indicate everything from new traders coming to town or resources being depleted, but you also get a number of subtle auditory clues that you learn to associate with different actions. The team has done a remarkable job making an intricately complex game as accessible as possible, mainly through the UI and smart decisions. At this point, you have pretty much all the knowledge you need to get started in the game, and like a good roguelite, it's going to take a bit of repetition to get good. Part of that process is failing over and over again, and that brings us back full circle to the roguelite aspect of Against the Storm. When you win or fail, you receive resources. These are more macro in nature, and there are only a few options, but they're the building blocks for restoring the smoldering city. Between map encounters, you'll head back to the city, a physical location you click into and unlock what you can. And these upgrades are huge because they provide persistent passive buffs moving forward within the game. Sometimes a buff will unlock a new embark item. Other times it will completely change up a system within the game. For example, this unlock here gives you 4 options when choosing a new building instead of 3. That's a game changer. In true roguelite fashion, the idea here is to constantly be improving, but Against the Storm is really taking the marathon approach. I mean, just look at the upgrade tree for the smoldering city. It's massive, and it isn't something you tackle in one sitting. And honestly, that's okay. If you're into this type of game, which is niche, let's be clear, you now have a pretty massive amount of content to work through. The scale might be a bit too ambitious given that each round takes about 30 minutes, and the rewards aren't exactly generous, but if you long for that addictive, slow grind, then this is absolutely the game for you. As you unlock new upgrades, you'll see the city come back to life through some simple illustrations that denote your progress. The final roguelite element is perhaps the simplest, the storm, which after a few map encounters will consume the entire world, setting you back to square one with only a handful of tiles to choose from and a new array of points of interest to seek out. It's a board wipe, one designed to hit the reset on your entire experience so that you can continue the cycle endlessly. If you're still with me, that means this game is probably resonating with you on some level. It sure did for me. I'm a sucker for a good city builder, and like I said in the intro, it's presenting some new and unique ideas that just hooked me. Where the game shines is with its complex array of connected systems. I don't know if I've ever experienced a game that does it this well, and I'm not just saying that. One choice at the beginning of a round could have a huge ripple effect down the line, and it's only by understanding that relationship can you adjust for future encounters. Everything, from the order system to the inner workings of a building's production line, is easy to understand, polished, and it feels relevant to the experience. There isn't a single aspect of the game that feels disconnected or unimportant, and that might actually be the game's biggest issue. As someone that loves systems, I have to say, Against the Storm nails it at nearly every turn, but it is a lot, like a real lot. Even playing on the second difficulty out of 4, I felt like I was constantly on my heels. Don't get me wrong, I love the challenge, but it's a steep mountain to climb with a substantial learning curve, and that might just isolate some fans that would otherwise be interested in checking out the game. This isn't really a critique, more of an observation, because if the devs wanted to create a challenging survival city builder, they accomplished that goal. I just think, and this is my opinion here, the game is going to be just out of reach for a lot of casual players that grew up with something more along the lines of Age of Empires. At the end of the day, the team knows the game that they want to create, and hopefully our stamp of approval will mean something to someone somewhere, because Against the Storm is really fun, albeit wickedly challenging. The team doesn't just check a box or reskin some old ideas, but instead they're trying to forge a new path, creating an entirely new genre in the process. It's a game I highly recommend and is definitely worth your time. So there you have it, our early access review of Against the Storm. There is a roadmap out for the game, so lots to come. And of course, this game is available right now on the PC for less than $20, depending on what service you choose to pick it up on. If you found this worth your time review helpful or enjoyable, do me a solid and hit that thumbs up and consider subscribing. There are still a few big games coming out in 2022, and if you're looking for a new take on some of the year's biggest titles, we've got you covered. I'm also excited to announce that Legacy Gaming has merch. We heard you guys loud and clear. You wanted to rock the blue and white, and now you can. Head over to our website, legacygaming.gg/shop, to check out brand new custom designs. We've got shirts, hoodies, and a hat, but rest assured more designs will come in the near future. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.